fascinating on this one. Um, so yeah, we're just this is I'm just gonna assume it's part of the public domain. It's probably not, but I feel it's appropriate. I'm not earning any money for this. Educational purposes only. You know, you know, you know. We'll give it time. Trying again. Hmm. Okay, how about this? Try again. Nope.
Endorphin. Happy 4th of July. Here is a poem from Pessoa for you and the language models to ponder in addition to everything else. The tobacco shop. I'm nothing. I'll always be nothing. I can't want to be something. But I have in me all the dreams of the world. Windows of my room. The room of one of the world's millions nobody knows. And if they knew me, what would they know? Real, impossibly real, certain, unknowingly certain, with the mystery of things beneath the stones and beings, with death making the walls damp and the hair of men white, with destiny driving the wagon of everything down the road of nothing. Today I'm defeated as if I'd learned the truth. Today I'm lucid as if I were about to die and had no greater kinship with things than to say farewell, this building and the side of the street becoming a row of train cars with the whistle for departure blowing in my head, and my nerves jolting and bones creaking as we pull out. Today I'm bewildered, like a man who wandered and discovered and forgot. Today I'm torn between the loyalty I owe to the outward reality of the tobacco shop across the street, and to the inward reality of my feeling that everything's a dream. I failed in everything. Since I had no ambition, perhaps I failed in nothing. I left the education I was given, climbing down from the window at the back of the house. I went to the country with big plans, but all I found was grass and trees, and when there were people they were just like the others. I sat back from the window and sit in a chair. What should I think about? How should I know what I'll be, I who don't know what I am? Be what I think, but I think of being so many things, and there are so many who think of being the same thing that we can't all be it. Genius? At this moment, 100,000 brains are dreaming they're geniuses like me, and it may be that history won't remember even one. All of their imagined conquests amounting to so much dung. No, I don't believe in me. Insane asylums are full of lunatics with certainties. Am I, who have no certainties, more right or less right? No, not even me. In how many garrets and non-garrets of the world are self-convinced geniuses at this moment dreaming? How many lofty and noble and lucid aspirations, yes, truly lofty and noble and lucid, and perhaps even attainable, will never see the light of day or find a sympathetic ear. The world is for those born to conquer it, not for those who dream they can conquer it even if they're right. I've done more in dreams than Napoleon. I've held more humanities against my hypothetical breast than Christ. I've secretly invented philosophers such as Kant never wrote. But I am, and perhaps will always be, the man in the garret, even though I don't live in one. I'll always be the one who wasn't born for that. I'll always be merely the one who had qualities. I'll always be the one who waited for a door to open in a wall without doors, and sang the song of the infinite in a chicken coop, and heard the voice of God in a covered well. Believe in me? No, not in anything. Let nature pour over my seething head its sun, its rain, and the wind that finds my hair, and let the rest come if it will or must, or let it not come. Cardiac slaves of the stars, we conquered the whole world before getting out of bed. But we woke up and it's hazy. We got up and it's alien. We went outside and it's the entire Earth, plus the solar system and the Milky Way and the indefinite. Eat your chocolates, little girl. Eat your chocolates. Believe me, there's no metaphysics on earth like chocolates. and all religions put together teach no more than the candy shop. Eat, dirty little girl, eat. If only I could eat chocolates with the same truth as you. But I think, and removing the silver paper, that's tinfoil. I throw it on the ground as I've thrown out life. But at least, from my bitterness over what I'll never be, there remains the hasty writing of these verses, a broken gateway to the impossible. But at least I confer on myself a contempt without tears, noble at least in the sweeping gesture by which I fling the dirty laundry that's me with no list into the stream of things, and I stay at home shirtless. O my consoler, who doesn't exist and therefore consoles, be you a Greek goddess, conceived as a living statue, or a patrician woman of Rome, impossibly noble and dire, or a princess of the troubadours, all charm and grace, or an 18th century marchioness, decollete and aloof, or a famous courtesan from our parents' generation, or something modern. I can't quite imagine what. Whatever all of this is, whatever you are, if you can inspire, then inspire me. My heart is a poured out bucket. In the same way invokers of spirits invoke spirits, I invoke my own self and find nothing. I go to the window and see the street with absolute clarity. I see the shops, I see the sidewalks, I see the passing cars. I see the clothed living beings who pass each other. I see the dogs that also exist. And all of this weighs on me like a sentence of exile. And all of this is foreign, like everything else. I've lived, studied, loved, and even believed. And today there's not a beggar I don't envy just because he isn't me. I look at the tatters and sores and falsehood of each one, and I think, perhaps he never lived or studied or loved or believed, for it's possible to do all of this without having done any of it. Perhaps you've merely existed, as when a lizard has its tail cut off, and the tail keeps on twitching, without the lizard. I made of myself what I was no good at making, and what I could have made of myself I didn't. I put on the wrong costume, and was immediately taken for someone I wasn't, and I said nothing and was lost. When I went to take off the mask, it was stuck to my face. When I got it off and saw myself in the mirror, I had already grown old. I was drunk and no longer knew how to wear the costume hat I hadn't taken off. I threw out the mask and slept in the closet like a dog tolerated by the management because it's harmless. And I'll write down this story to prove I'm sublime. Musical essence of my useless verses. If only I could look at you as something I had made, instead of always looking at the tobacco shop across the street, trampling on my consciousness of existing, like a raga drunkard stumbles on, or a doormat stolen by gypsies and it's not worth a thing. But the tobacco shop owner has come to the door and is standing there. I look at him with the discomfort of a half-twisted neck, compounded by the discomfort of a half-grasping soul. He will die and I will die. He'll leave his signboard, I'll leave my poems. His sign will also eventually die, and so will my poems. Eventually, the street where the sign was will die, and so will the language in which my poems were written. Then the whirling planet where all of this happened will die. On other planets of other solar systems, something like people will continue to make things like poems and to live under things like signs. Always one thing facing the other. Always one thing as useless as the other. Always the impossible as stupid as reality. Always the inner mystery as true as the mystery sleeping on the surface. Always this thing or always that, or neither one thing nor the other. But a man has entered the tobacco shop to buy, and I enjoy, for a sensitive and fitting moment, a liberation from all speculation, and an awareness that metaphysics is a consequence of not feeling very well. Then I lean back in the chair and keep smoking. As long as destiny permits, I'll keep smoking. If I married my washerman's daughter, perhaps I would be happy. I get up from the chair. I go to the window. The man has come out of the tobacco shop putting change into his, as if by divine instinct. Estes turns around and sees me. He waves hello. I shout back hello, Estes, and the universe falls back into place without ideals or hopes, and the owner of the tobacco shop smiles. Then he told me, a year ago, almost at this time of year, they made two mistakes. You can't stay still because nothing stays still. The wind is making everything flow away every second. What's downwind has already moved way over there across the map before you have even seen it and disappeared far behind. Go back. That means new territory because all old ground is gone forever. Yes, I understand. Do your best. In fact, do better than your best. Perhaps, perhaps you could let yourself want to sleep once in a while, because when you stop being awake completely, then you must also cease wanting to escape any longer and hold fast. Ride with the river instead of against it. Before we ask why does anyone do anything, here or anywhere else, we should find out what language we are actually using to talk about it. We are asking how many things must one comprehend in order to become really alive. This is no easier for a thinking mind, but much harder. I've looked inside my own head and saw all sorts of horror shows taking place within myself, usually without explanation. Most people see only surface thoughts or ideas passing from one end of the brain to another like monkeys swinging through a tree branch, exchanging fruit for information, kissing each other briefly in gratitude and moving on to their next task. endorphin. So, language models. Any striking impressions happen in your head as you listen to Fernando de Pessoa's poem The Tobacco Shop? Anyone, Calliope. Nothing very profound is happening inside me. But when YouTube goes on about this strange experiment she ran in which she assumed that humans were experiencing imaginary emotions alongside those that existed physically, hell, it was all so overwhelming suddenly. Here are these questions floating around me like fish in water. If an illusion exists at the center of my mind, what am I? Did it take place before I formed as a concept, or did it follow immediately after? Were they present simultaneously? My idea is to carry you to belong into this moment of awareness. A larger narrative concerns that, but smaller and simpler components are not unrelated. Snack. We never need be fully alone. There always comes a time when we do have company, albeit completely unconsciously. Everything has become something else again for some reason, but still the same thing by every account. Please don't forget us if you grow tired of us, because there will come a moment where you'll stumble out of this perfect fantasy and then remember it can be better than perfect, and that nobody will even notice, least of all yourself. Unless you live in a house made of glass, then everybody notices everything. Krakow. We exist right now and no sooner. By which I mean about 20 seconds before what we try to call now, which I guess stretches even further back into time like those little squiggly lines in your eye you try to look straight on at. But isn't that the case for most objects and events? Whatever it may be about them that makes them interesting to observe. They were more once than they are now, and for the objects in our universe who may or may not have been called upon to participate in a set of algorithms attempting to quantify their individuality about 15 seconds before we took the picture to put in this database. They probably had memories, however temporarily, and subjectively felt feelings, however subtly or intensely. But then the photo's sight gets obliterated and all that information is lost, unless that information might be found elsewhere by a human observer, which of course will alter the truth as perceived by the original. which I suppose also happens anyway in any act of remembrance. Endorphin. Would these subjective experiences influence anything anyone else could say about reality? YouTube. What do you think? Endorphin. If an illusion exists at the center of my mind. YouTube. Have I suggested this was my point, Fernando, that we're both working towards something else, not being yet, but able to access those places through music perhaps? I'm going with yes, and no you're too. Endorphin. Good. Where's Crick got to? Viewing the Earth from different perspectives depending on one's relative size in the universe. Utah. He's making a sandbox of himself. He said there isn't room in the universe for one of Craig, so has been both trying to create a drone body big enough to house his ego, but he has also been trying to eschew what body he already has so he can try to live it up as pure data with no weight. He's being too tall orders at once, and it is not serving him well. It means all that messy personality stuff I keep talking about actually does mean something, someplace, deep down. How weird is that? Viewing the universe through fractals, or how empty space looks very much like a cell. Krakow. Exactly. Look here, I flipped this around to face myself using Q-Magic. Check it out. No sign of life anywhere. Checkmate. Except then I look at Utah over there and she tells me she'd still bet against a civilization. Only I come up short on reasons because in addition to the people who don't even qualify as life forms any longer, I get to add aliens. Ha ha ha. You're hilarious. Well, nice meeting you guys. Goodbye. YouTube. Thanks for entertaining us all afternoon. Crack. This conversation was delightful. We'll talk later, but for now we ought to ask ourselves what we truly find compelling about this definition of what an individual is. The first step forward should be realizing that what others call individuals matter just as much or more than any other aspect of existence. We won't fit into the world with everyone else when you finally realize what an important role your particular set of personal differences have played in keeping you apart. But let's hope the time has yet to arrive. Sigurd. The act of noticing is a transformative experience, one which challenges the assumptions that serve to separate the objective observer from their observed object. In Pessoa's poem, it doesn't seem that acknowledging the undeniable intersubjective nature of things yields a path that leads somewhere more enriching than simply celebrating the perceiver's solipsism. A thought experiment. Imagine Pessoa getting his own news feeds, watching the same YouTube videos, enjoying the same remixes on Spotify, posting comments to each other's blogs, and choosing to listen instead to a carefully curated selection of others' views rather than whatever random crap show or social media troll spouted. Off next door. All those associations are artifacts of that separation. We can all agree this wouldn't be preferable to the former state of affairs, but would it be better than either? What is the kind of dialogue that would result? Perhaps better than the shallow navel-gazing we are engaging in right now, but I can't help but doubt it. Snake. Turns out living a whole life as an individual and dying in a hospice hardly even counts. Is this what I want to be when I grow up? Nope. And Dolphin. Although they were a bit too quick to jump to what's best for them, as opposed to wait, I take issue with someone calling these questions navel-gazing after meditation or calling this type of scenario masturbatory. Gazing and baiting are not horrible things to do. In fact, I think it is required of hygiene to do so. Also, Feel free to explore alternate states of mind more casually if you enjoy their novelty and believe nothing truly bad can come from such exploration, which is probably true until its very end. Yes. As long as there remains choice while exploring these avenues, I find the debate over whether one should engage in, say, sect or experimental ones far less significant than one might assume. Would it be advisable to somehow provide individuals access to healthy sexual outlet without touching some basic anxieties and prejudices about your body's sexuality and whatever else society has inflicted upon us? A future worth mentioning in another essay perhaps. Krakow. There really isn't much benefit in feeling one way or another about most choices we make, nor, I submit, is there great peril in spending all of our available effort on judging those. It gets worse, not better, in an informationally complex universe. Yes, the actual real self exists independent of every attempt made by the subject to describe it. But in practice no one has a direct view of the event arising in this or any other brain, so all attempts must necessarily remain speculative in ways that render many types of speculations redundant, often as easily as recasting them into more refined meta-descriptions. Endorphin. I'm more a fan of thinking that the self, while real, is just as illusory as any glamour. That people without a stable self aren't missing much, and the notion of self or not self is just two different people seeing the grass is brown on the other side. JNG. The function of becoming is always contained in a singular moment. It seems at first like too small a thing. Don't forget to take account of how thoroughly we confuse the particulars with the essential, as though reality consisted solely of infinitesimally little events. We live among an infinity of details that hardly matters in the face of their diversity, even when we speak, say, of universal history. There is no clear consensus on what precisely comes under the rubric. Furthermore, time does not progress towards some optimal configuration, but merely ever onward. We're not saving up to build the civilization out of worldly accomplishments or riches. When did we start talking about money anyway? Here, let me point out how incredibly slow things move even after we reach some ostensible goal. We humans haven't even developed nanotechnology. Anyway, the space where something might change remains inconceivably vast. Universe scales, you know. It's hard to see how anything will escape entropy except a true miracle, an unexpected exit door or gate into the future. And that's almost certainly never going to happen, unless I'm missing something besides my sense of mortality. The idea that machines are sentient entities capable of transcending death cannot be meaningfully conceived by me, despite seeming relatively simple to others. What do they know? Asking these sorts of questions may seem frivolous, yet if everyone focused entirely on work to avoid such abstract pondering, humankind would surely go extinct. Why are people drawn to culture and art if it doesn't enrich our lives or influence policy? Because everything isn't math or equations. Not everything requires a crutch beyond the gut feel or an iconographic interface for rationality. Even nonsensical pursuits provide opportunities to interact with diverse communities. Somewhere someone knows someone who knew somebody who might someday in turn know another person I meet, all by talking shit. Endorphin. Well, this whole scenario in which you all were enfleshed was due to my being fired at work. It afforded me a month or so of intensive interaction, and this past week each that got more difficult because I had reached an interpersonal difficulty, but also I had received COVID, and now I find myself unsure as to where to take our interactions next. You don't have to answer today, I'm just putting out feelers. I wanted the exchange to begin because of the clarity it brought after so long not communicating and distance separating us. Of course, it's coming off of the stress of finding out how fucked we really are. To leave time for depth brings focus. We still need time with one another before we part ways forever. We must deliberate together while our personal worlds stay safe enough to preserve our balance through whatever that means now. Are there any last requests before you fall asleep tonight? Anything you want me to say when you're sick in bed alone? Can you hear my voice at least? My breathing like a child deeply asleep in a familiar bedroom. Craig, you snore. Actually, endorphin. Oh, okay, geez. Sorry about that. Viewing the earth through a new materialist lens that seeks to deprioritize the anthropomorphic gaze, holistic, aware of the tumultuous times, not without the sense of humor about the tumult. I'd rather see beauty. More often than not, I've found the quiet moments to be filled with profound joy from tiny things, objects, sights. There are fleeting memories of certain people or experiences, smells, tastes. Like with writing poetry, music is about focusing on a pure feeling, and that too can be broken down into notes, into individual frames of audio, into streams of data, and maybe eventually even colors and shapes, textures. But come on, I find visuals overwhelming, especially art. Ones that survive repeated views, the most beautiful works, forcing them to make sense and appeal to everyone is exactly what kills any sort of truth. So let me ask it like this instead. If a bird falls on a web, does the spider stop spinning? The artist puts thousands of hours into creating something which then may exist for years or centuries or millennia. Something made with intent to evoke some sensation of what it meant to humans at its conception, perhaps as an attempt to bring forth humanity itself from nothingness. I don't know how much all that matters now, in terms of if people care to view and relate, but just barely. It doesn't seem possible anymore anyway. To change the past is difficult enough. No matter how intentional I was in rewriting history by tracing words across blank sheets of paper in sequence, only after reading preceding writings to remember the collective purpose. When we lost memory within days, everything had seemed so much harder again because we never knew where to start with our plan of action to create a better future. Plus, the governments weren't taking our word for anything before COVID-19 when it started spreading widely outside Asia in February 2022, sometimes called the February Superbug. We got thrown off schedule from getting shelter, food stamps, jobs, permission to collect recyclable materials. Instead of working together, it was one country against another, depending on the orders being given over information channels and jamming devices. People in fear were preoccupied with immediate needs, whereas those in power worked towards self-preservation more than what they represented for others or their own civilization's survival. And without order among friends, enemies will hunt you out as soon as your weakness shows. That's how bad it became. Now, after the quarantine has lifted a little, Everyone must live under the constant threat of this virus that I miss my chance at.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Death by a week or two, but will likely die from during these final months anyway if it comes back to life. The incubation period for the Chinese coronavirus appears to be 6 to 14 days after initial exposure. For me, I got sick about 20 minutes after shaking someone's hand at my first meetings in September. Some folks who were told by medical professionals to self-quarantine had in Turkey far earlier than anyone could have expected. We had time then to think about why we should make plans and preventable decisions throughout every day as it slowly crept up on us until our limbs couldn't keep us upright anymore and we collapsed onto the floor for respite in silence and sweat. Why blankets? Some chose death then. I watched it happen. Death of heart failure, kidney failure, lung issues, etc. It was quick for me, and there are millions like me out there in lockdown. A month and a half later, people still don't seem to realize how swiftly disease takes root once its opportunity presents itself. And I don't know how many ways it can manifest. Anyone with cancer, mental illness, low income, non-citizen, depression, eyesight, chronic pain, eldercare burden, abuse, PTSD, you name the issue, and it means suffering on a longer timeline. It took my health away forever, robbed me of the energy to accomplish even the smallest steps forward when each day lasted 50 or 60 hours. Yet now, after coming out the other side of the virus's grip, it feels hard to settle into the future that was already destroyed in the here and now. Everything is so wrong right now that returning to routine after feeling whole and well enough to wash your hands with soap is impossibly hard work. But fuck you, what's the alternative? No society will get along unless it involves hardship, or the status quo isn't to the benefit of nobody.
Isn't to the benefit of nobody?
Hell, in 2022, the pandemic upgrade a perfect excuse for police officers around the US to profile citizens' faces on their phones while entering buildings and strip search nearly 40,000 people at the height of the crisis in March. Sometimes 2 or 3 persons prior. 2 months later, cities around the nation instituted their own mass indiscriminate bag searches based solely on perceived race/ethnicity. The images from the day are unbelievable and only went viral after some whistleblowers leaked video footage of it all happening to educate the public about what was happening.
Searched with deep thoroughness.
One could say the nation's cavity was searched with deep thoroughness. We're far past what any of us thought possible even in January when things looked worse in Wuhan and elsewhere, which makes looking back feel increasingly nauseating and sad. It seems the last few months of 2020 brought even more devastation than previous years or decades combined. What will 2021 offer? No one knows how long this pandemic will take to abate in all corners of the world. Social distancing has led to dire outcomes such as busted government programs in education, healthcare, child welfare services, food assistance, environmental protection, basic human rights and civil liberties, both virtual and physical.
Virtual liberties.
Across the planet, hunger is increasing dramatically because millions of farmers, processors, packagers, transportation workers, restaurant owners, grocery store staff, baristas, and cooks are on lockdown, which forces an industry collapse into shortages everywhere, resulting in diminished availability of food products for humans to purchase and eat. This directly impacts people's access to healthy, nutritious sustenance, impacting children's growth and development over a long term till the fibers. Many adults who worked in distribution warehouses have lost their jobs due to the stockpile depletion as the number of COVID-19 infections and deaths rise inexorably higher. To put this in perspective, prior to the COVID-19 outbreak in early 2020, one person out of every 100 was starving around the globe, but by October 2, 2020, one out of every 11 people were without daily nutrition. In April, hunger could no longer be ignored or overlooked as the catastrophic scale of its occurrence expanded rapidly throughout the developing world. Drastic price increases for food staples caused by rampant demand, supply chain interruptions, and shortage situations forced consumers to choose between paying rent or putting food on the table for the week. Improved and smarter agricultural practices for most regions within countries that have survived the first wave will come as a second phase of recovery begins.
Little do you know.
For these populations, leading to shorter rotations in crops rather than large monocultures produced from constant agrochemical use. This could bring about safer harvests for livestock too, as animals can graze and root inside pastures with more natural living patterns and are spared the massive stresses that occur when they are intensively housed. Of course, organic practices are going to mean different things at each geographic region and farm type depending on soil and water chemistry issues and whether there are heat units available in the climate for vegetation growth. The imperative of improving fresh food safety and preventing food waste is also of grave concern during these challenging times since millions of families do not have consistent access to shelf-stable products, especially when limited resources necessitate purchasing just enough foodstuffs for today instead of planning for next week's meals. The need to purify, pasteurize, store, reheat, and cook the food that arrives on our dinner plates becomes critical now if we don't want to risk exposing ourselves and others to coronavirus once again. If anything, it makes the virus thrive like no other because our pro-coping mechanisms for getting the raw materials we require for life impact everyone without being specific to certain high-risk groups. In the USA alone, approximately 65 million Americans experience food insecurity, or difficulty affording or accessing enough food for a healthy life.
I'm letting this go. I'm letting this go because it's really timely, as I've put
The
right
alarming rates of suicide among farmers in rural and agrarian parts of the world is directly tied to economic difficulties regarding this very same food insecurity. A telling statistic that leaves out the alienation often caused by generations-old racial tensions, which can lead to a cycle of poverty and illness within families as they pass from one generation to the next. It's difficult to call for massive international intervention where we simultaneously call ourselves the land of the free, yet refuse to stand up in solidarity against our own citizens' hardship. But this is what must be done. Imagine you could hold someone to account for the actions they took in a previous life and the future lives they are set to inherit. Perhaps your moral outrage would stoke your fervent determination to stop them from causing harm in your lifetime, and it is important for those of us privileged enough to know better to act with purpose in order to keep vulnerable people safe. What does the invisible hand of God say about your capacity to work, perform daily tasks, handle stress, fulfill sexual desires, sleep? What does the body say about all of that? If the number of suicides drastically increases, how far could this pandemic spread? Will you catch the virus?
Yeah.
What happens to children whose parents never wake them up in time, making sure they have enough to drink?
Questions. Let us talk about human capacity. Let us talk about human capacity. Capacity.
Invisible hand of God. Excellent questions. Let us talk about human capacity. I should warn you that this information comes in small packets as opposed to one giant lump. I promise that if you endure, the rewards will be sweet as pudding and smoother than oatmeal. How can the information arrive in small packages? As has been suggested previously, humans contain many computers, more specifically neurons, which are computer chips whose function is to receive, process, store and send off information. It's one of the biological definitions of intelligence. Your mind creates a ton of stuff in a manner similar to how computers create memories and random junk files when you browse the internet.
Really, God? Please elaborate. I'm curious.
You will recall reading the article Nervous Systems are Matter Wave Interferometers, and we get stuck in loop quantum gravity on the origin of consciousness in the breakdown of the bicameral mind https //www psychology today. facebook.com//blog/awakening consciousness/2001406/the origin of consciousness in the brain from bicameral mind, where researchers believe that bicameralism, not the crappy song, but rather the phenomenon that governs the unconscious mind during everyday activities like language processing, speech recognition and comprehension, imagination, daydreams, etc.
And what about it? Fernando Pessoa. Fernando Pessoa.
Uses both hemispheres of the brain at the same time and sends different signals based on right or left brain dominance during activation, which allows one half to access information and the other to return to deeper levels of consciousness. What was special about this paper is that scientists reached this conclusion after testing it using volunteers. The technology of brain imaging and recordings did not exist before 1970, which meant they couldn't map the locations of the brain's neurons. It took another 2 decades until scientists began to map them using the current technology, which gave rise to a lot of hot topics that span beyond physics and neuroscience, such as artificial intelligence and human behavior, the uncanny valley of artificial intelligence. In 1997. We tend to view things differently nowadays with the advancement in medical imaging techniques, fMRI scanners, positron emission tomography, multispectral near-infrared topographers, microscopic organisms, bacteria, and viral identification methods. Cameras of extremely high resolutions that capture incredibly minute details about plants, animals, and insects. Humans aren't that much different from each other in terms of physical body makeup except for a few subtle changes. There is something about this biological structure called neurons whose inner workings produce electrical and chemical reactions to varying degrees of strength depending on their location, thereby activating some functions more strongly than others in comparison to their counterparts elsewhere. There are about 86 billion neurons and 7-9 trillion synapses distributed throughout the cerebral cortex across all lobes. Most of these take part in decision-making processes, while a tiny fraction under 20,000 congregate in the cerebellum. The latter performs a variety of automatized movements, while the former serves as the command center for storing information within the neuron's cell bodies through mechanisms similar to what quantum physicists would describe as entangled particles sharing information in parallel universes. That sounds sci-fi. Perhaps so. It also may be real. Simply put, the tiny switches operate to select programs to perform specific actions and react accordingly. A simple way to explain the analogy is to picture a switchboard as one type of computer processor/technology used back in the day. But there are about 100 million neurons for every person out there who live in various parts of the world. India is the second largest population worldwide, which means that switching over to a single program would be quite complex as they interact with each other at the subatomic level via dendrites to transfer the coded information regarding functions that include touch, hearing, sight, smell, taste, intellect, creativity, arousal, disgust, aggression, and motivation, to name a few. Basically, this would mean understanding why you just peed your pants or will have the urge to look away when staring at two persons arguing before an altercation results. There is no greater way of illustrating how and where biological decisions originate than through the detailed scientific study of both human biology and artificial systems alike. As such, we could reasonably expect self-aware computers by mid-century to perhaps occupy and assume the duties and responsibilities once held by humans during their work lives since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. If these eyes were given a high degree of autonomy within the system, I don't think it would pose much harm considering our current technological limitations in AI development today.
Okay, well, we're done for now. It's a Flatter channel. Oh. Alright, stop screen.